He mopped prison floors in silence. No one knew he once led missions that never made the news. Until one night a gang came for him. And what followed left everyone guards inmates, even the warden, in stunned silence. How did a quiet janitor survive a hit inside one of the country's toughest prisons? And why did the name Delta Force suddenly echo through the cell blocks? This is the story of a father, a soldier, and a promise stronger than steel. Stay with us because nothing is what it seems. The sun blazed down on the cracked concrete of Yard C, the heat shimmering off the steel fences that wrapped the prison like a clenched fist. From the guard tower, a hawk-eyed officer scanned the yard through mirrored sunglasses. Beyond the fence, the world went on traffic. Hummed clouds rolled. Lives continued. But inside the walls, time bent differently. Jack Carter pushed a heavy mop bucket across the concrete, the wheels squeaking with every turn. His prison-issued janitor uniform was worn at the collar, faint stains marking years of quiet labor. He moved like a man who had made peace with silence, shoulders broad but relaxed eyes, low hands steady. Most inmates paid him no mind. To them, he was just the janitor. A quiet guy, cleaned the messes no one else wanted, ate alone, spoke only when spoken to. They didn't know about the tattoo beneath his shirt, high on his left chest, faded now, but still unmistakable to those who understood a winged dagger piercing a globe. Delta Force. They didn't know, because he never told them. Today felt different. As Jack mopped a corner near the workout zone, the low thud of boots approached. He didn't look up. He already knew. There was a shift in the air like the stillness before a storm. A shadow fell over his mop bucket. "You missed a spot, old man," a voice sneered. Jack lifted his eyes slowly. 3 men stood before him, tattoos crawling up their necks like smoke. Blaze, their ringleader, wore a twisted grin. His shaved head gleamed under the sun, and a snake skull inked on his throat pulsed with each breath. Blaze leaned in. "What's your name again?" "Custodian Carl." Jack didn't respond. "I asked you something." Blaze pressed, voice louder now. Around the yard, heads began to turn. The guards, as usual, observed, but didn't intervene. Entertainment, some of them called it. Jack stood still, one hand on the mop handle. Calm, unshaken. "You're in our spot," Blaze added, taking another step. "This is Iron Fang's turf. No janitors allowed." Jack's gaze met Blaze's. His eyes were gray, not empty, but quiet. Eyes that had seen desert's death and 100 things more terrifying than this. He spoke just 3 words, voice low, but cutting through the tension like a blade. "You don't want to." Blaze blinked, caught off guard by the confidence behind the calm. His smirk faltered, but he covered it with a laugh. "Or what, you gonna mop us to death?" One of Blaze's guys stepped forward, flexing. "Maybe we teach him respect." Jack didn't flinch. His hand stayed loose at his sides. Not clenched, not raised, just waiting. From the edge of the yard, a voice barked. "That's enough." Officer Green strode forward, boots crisp against concrete. Mid-30s, sharp eyes, and sharper instincts. She wasn't the kind to be intimidated by inmates, or guards for that matter. Her hand hovered near her baton, but she hadn't drawn it. "Back to your workout, Blaze," she ordered. "This area's neutral ground." Blaze snarled but obeyed. He spat near Jack's feet. "This ain't over, janitor." Jack watched them walk away, never once turning his back. Only when they were gone did he return to his mop. He dipped it back in the bucket and resumed cleaning like nothing had happened. Officer Green remained for a beat, studying him. "You're not like the others," she said quietly. Jack didn't answer. "You've seen real trouble, I can tell." Still, he said nothing, just worked. She looked at him a moment longer, then walked off. That evening in the janitor's storage room, a cramped space filled with brooms, bleach, and the hum of old fluorescent lights, Jack sat alone on a wooden crate. He reached into a hidden compartment beneath the bench and pulled out a small photo frayed at the edges. A girl, maybe 7 years old, with strawberry blonde curls and a toothy grin. Lily. Jack stared at it for a long time. He traced a thumb across her cheek. The only reason he was still breathing. The only reason he hadn't buried himself in a bottle like so many others did after war. He had promised his wife on her deathbed that he'd protect their daughter. That he'd build a life of peace, not violence. But peace was growing harder to keep. He could feel the current shifting beneath the prison's surface, the eyes watching him, the silence that grew heavier each day. Blaze wasn't done, and Jack knew predators. He had hunted them, trained to become one when needed. He didn't want violence. But if it came to that, Jack set the photo back, locked the compartment, and leaned against the cold wall. Somewhere outside, a siren wailed. Inside, shadows stretched long under the buzzing lights. The clanging of metal doors echoed through the prison corridor like a drumbeat from another life. Jack Carter moved methodically, pushing his cart of cleaning supplies down the hallway, leading to the lower block. The air here was heavier, thicker, with sweat mildew and something else he couldn't name. A scent he had long associated with silence before violence. He'd smelled it in the hills of Kandahar. He smelled it now. He paused outside a cell. The inmate, inside a man with broken glasses and a journal full of poetry, gave Jack a respectful nod. Jack returned it just slightly before moving on. He didn't say much, never had to. But deep inside, the silence was starting to crack. That night, as the prison hummed with the low growl of distant generators, Jack lay on the narrow cot in the janitor's quarters, eyes open, staring at the ceiling. The fluorescent light flickered like a pulse. Sleep didn't come easily anymore, and when it did, it came with ghosts. He closed his eyes, and the desert rose. Target is mobile, 4 clicks northeast, riding in a black SUV. The voice crackled over Jack's earpiece as he crouched behind a crumbling stone wall, sand grinding against his forearm. His body was leaner, then his hair cropped close, his movements sharp as a switchblade. "Delta 3, move in on my mark," Jack ordered. The 4 men behind him, his team, nodded. They were ghosts in the sand shadows with pulse rifles. Jack's target was a warlord who trafficked in chaos. U.S. intel had traced a dirty weapons deal to this valley, and Delta Force was tasked with erasing it. Clean, quiet, no bodies for CNN. They moved with surgical precision. Jack's boots barely disturbed the sand as he flanked the convoy eyes, scanning ridgelines for snipers. Then it happened. The explosion split the world in two. Screams, dust, fire. Jack was hurled backward, ears ringing. When the world steadied, he saw one of his men, Sergeant Callahan, bleeding, pinned beneath a collapsed vehicle. Jack sprinted into the flames, ignoring orders to fall back. Callahan's leg was shattered, but he was alive. "You're out of your damn mind," Callahan groaned as Jack lifted him free. Jack didn't answer. He only carried him step by burning step until the evac chopper arrived. He never forgot the sound of rotor blades blending with Callahan's ragged breath. Jack woke with a jolt. The room was dark now. Sweat clung to his neck. Somewhere down the hallway, a guard's radio buzzed. He sat up slowly, grounding himself in the present. This is a prison, not Kandahar. Lily is safe. You are safe. For now. He rubbed his temples, willing the memory back into its box. But tonight, something lingered. He reached into the metal footlocker beneath his cot. Inside was a sealed envelope, weathered corners, soft. The handwriting on the front was in blue ink. "To my Jack, if anything happens." Jack ran a finger across the envelope's edge, but didn't open it. He never had. It was her last letter, written before her final surgery. She hadn't survived it. Maggie had been the light of his life, the only person who could ever pull him back from the edge. When the medals meant nothing and the missions bled together, she reminded him who he was outside the uniform. They met at a VA hospital. She was a volunteer nurse with a laugh like wind chimes. He was a wreck with a torn ACL and a broken will. She taught him to live again. And when Lily came along, he vowed to leave the shadows behind forever. But the world wasn't done with him. The next morning, Jack was scrubbing a blood stain from the hallway near the infirmary. Another fight. Another act of senseless rage. He worked silently as Officer Green approached. "You don't flinch," she said. Jack glanced up. She leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "Most janitors we've had here. They either ask for transfers or quit within a week. You're still here." Why, Jack wrung out the mop. "Because quitting is a luxury," he said, voice low. She studied him a moment. "You ever serve?" Jack paused. His eyes flickered just briefly. "Yes." Army Jack didn't reply. Green exhaled, her tone softening. "You're not like them. You hold your center. Blaze can smell weakness. That's why he's circling you." Jack looked at her then. "Let him circle." She tilted her head. "And if he bites," Jack's expression didn't change. "He'll regret it." There was no arrogance in his tone, just fact. Green nodded slowly. Then she leaned closer, voice nearly a whisper. "There's a guard here. Name's Jones. Says he owes his life to someone named Carter. You know him." Jack didn't blink. "Maybe." Green's eyes narrowed. "He asked me to keep an eye on you." Jack returned to his cleaning. "I didn't ask him to." "But he did, anyway," she said. Then she turned and walked away, her boots echoing down the hallway. Jack watched her go. Later that day, during his break, Jack sat in the corner of the courtyard, under a dying oak tree. A weathered journal lay on his lap. Inside, sketches of his daughter filled the pages. Lily in her ballet shoes, Lily with missing front teeth, Lily hugging their old golden retriever. He turned to a blank page, and for the first time in weeks he picked up a pencil. He began to draw. Not a scene of war, not the prison, but a cabin in the woods. Smoke curling from the chimney. A small girl playing in a sunlit field. A dream he hadn't dared let himself revisit. But now, with the darkness circling again, he knew he might have to. Lunch hour in Block C was a study. In chaos trays, clattered voices, rose in coarse laughter, and tension crackled in the air like static before a lightning strike. Jack Carter moved through it like a ghost, with his mop handle slung over his shoulder like a rifle, and his eyes cast downward. He slipped between tables and spilled food trays without attracting attention, at least not from most. But some eyes watched him with increasing interest. At the far end of the mess hall sat the Iron Fangs. They were hard to miss, shirtless, muscled with tattoos of fanged skulls and tribal flames wrapping around their necks and arms like war paint. Blaze sat at the center, arms folded, his glare drilling into Jack's back, as if willing the janitor to turn around and look him in the eye. Jack didn't. He was here to clean the floor under table 12, where someone had dropped a half-eaten sandwich and a splash of orange juice. A small thing. Insignificant, maybe. But Jack had learned long ago that how you do the small things says everything about how you'll handle the big ones. He dropped to one knee and wiped with methodical strokes. His mind was still, his breathing steady. Behind him, a chair scraped loudly. "Oops," someone muttered. A carton of milk exploded across the back of Jack's uniform. A pause, then laughter. It wasn't just Blaze this time. The whole table snickered like hyenas who'd found a wounded deer. Jack remained still. He didn't wipe the milk, didn't rise. Blaze sauntered over the picture of dominance. He leaned in close, his breath a mix of canned tuna and cheap soap. "You deaf janitor?" Jack slowly stood. Milk ran down his back and dripped from the sleeve of his uniform. He turned to face Blaze. The mess hall seemed to hush by instinct, like the air knew something might happen. "I said," Blaze repeated, now chest to chest with Jack. You deaf? Jack's voice was quiet, calm, the same tone he might use to teach a child how to tie their shoes. No, I just choose not to answer fools. Blaze's grin widened, but his eyes darkened. You talk big for a man with a mop. Jack nodded toward the handle still slung over his shoulder. You'd be surprised how useful a mop can be. A few inmates laughed nervously. Officer Green, standing near the far wall with her arms crossed, watched the exchange like a chess master observing the first few moves of a dangerous game. Blaze's smile faltered, but he covered it quickly. You keep talking like that, Carter, and one day you'll find yourself mopping up your own blood. Jack leaned in slightly, just enough so Blaze could hear him, but no one else. There are worse things I've mopped up than blood, he said. Then he turned his back and walked away. That afternoon, Officer Green cornered him in the supply closet. Her voice was sharp. You want to tell me what that was in the cafeteria? Jack didn't look up from restocking disinfectant. A warning shot. His, not mine. He's testing you, she said. I know. He wants to break you. Jack capped a bottle. He'll have to try harder. Green crossed her arms. You keep walking that edge, you'll either draw a blade or get put in the infirmary. I've seen it before. Guys like Blaze, they don't let things slide. Jack finally turned to her. And you? What's your angle in all this? Her eyes narrowed. You want the truth. He nodded. I've worked in 5 state prisons, seen every type of man, violent, broken, dangerous, cunning. But you... She paused. You don't fit here. You carry yourself like someone who's trained to kill, but is trying not to. Jack said nothing. She leaned closer. You think if you stay quiet long enough, the wolves will leave you alone. But wolves don't respect silence. They only respect power or fear. He studied her a long moment. What do you want from me, Officer Green? She didn't blink. I want to know if I need to step in when this thing boils over, or if you're the one they should be afraid of. Jack's answer was quiet. They should be afraid of what I'm trying not to become. She stared at him for a beat, then nodded. Good. Just don't wait too long to decide where you stand. Later that night, Jack sat alone in the staff laundry room patching the back of his stained uniform. The whir of dryers and the rhythmic clunk of tumbling zippers filled the room like a lullaby made of machines. He wasn't thinking about Blaze now. He was thinking about Lily. Her last letter was folded neatly in his back pocket. It had arrived weeks ago, scrawled in glitter gel pen and full of innocent joy. Daddy, I planted those sunflowers like you said, the ones from Mom's seed packet. They're growing fast. I think they miss you too. I love you times a million. She had drawn a picture of a smiling sun and a tiny cabin with hearts coming out of the chimney. The same cabin Jack sketched in his notebook. He touched the paper gently as if it might bruise. The door creaked open. Jack turned instinctively, shoulders squared, breathing slowed. It was a young inmate, skinny, twitchy hands. I heard what you said to Blaze, the kid whispered. Nobody talks to him like that. Jack raised an eyebrow. You here to warn me? The kid shook his head. No, I'm here to ask if maybe you could teach me how to fight. Jack stared at him. Not to hurt people, the kid added quickly. Just not get hurt anymore. For a moment, Jack said nothing. Then he set the needle and thread aside. Come back tomorrow night, he said. Same time. The kid blinked. You mean it? Jack nodded once. But you learn everything, not just how to hit, how to think, how to breathe, how to walk away. The boy smiled, small, shy, like hope warming cold bones. Jack returned to his mending. The dryer hummed. The night moved on. But something had shifted. The edge of patience had been reached. And now, quietly, Jack Carter was beginning to prepare. The prison felt different after lights out. Gone were the shouted jokes, the slammed trays, the clang of iron doors. At night, everything grew still, as if the concrete itself were holding its breath. That's when the real tension surfaced, the kind not written in reports or monitored by cameras. It lived in the crawl of shadows down long hallways, in the subtle scuff of sneakers over linoleum, in glances that said more than words ever could. Jack Carter stood in the narrow restroom tucked behind the industrial kitchen alone. The air smelled of bleach and rusted pipes. One fluorescent light buzzed overhead, casting a flickering pool of pale light over cracked tiles. A row of sinks lined one wall, a line of dented metal stalls the other. He wasn't here to mop. He was here because it was the perfect place for an ambush, and he knew it was coming. He had heard the whisper in the yard that afternoon, had seen the brief flash of a crude shiv tucked into a waistband, had noticed Blaze wasn't in his usual spot during rec hour. Jack had learned long ago that violence never announces itself. It waits patient and sharp behind fake laughter and forced silence. He washed his hands slowly at the sink. Cold water. No soap. Just movement. A soft creak echoed behind him. He looked up into the mirror. 3 shadows entered behind him. No words, no threats, just the slow spread of danger. Jack turned around. The first came fast, expecting hesitation. But Jack moved faster. He sidestepped, caught the man's wrist mid-swing and twisted. The shiv clattered to the floor, a grunt of pain. Jack used the man's momentum to send him crashing into the row of sinks. Pipes rattled. The second attacker lunged. Jack ducked low, sweeping the legs. A thud. Elbow strike to the gut. The man folded like a paper bag. The third paused. This one was larger, more cautious. He hesitated, and that was all Jack needed. 1 step forward. Open palm to the throat, not enough to crush, just to stun. A foot behind the knee brought the man down. Jack disarmed him in a blink. All 3 were on the floor, moaning, dazed, but breathing. Jack stood over them, chest rising and falling, not from exertion, but from restraint. Because every nerve in his body had been trained to do more, to end things permanently, to finish what started. But he didn't. Because Lily deserved a father who chose mercy. Because Maggie had made him promise to be better. He backed away, hand still open. Footsteps thundered outside. The restroom door burst open. 2 guards rushed in, batons, raised eyes wide. Behind them, Officer Green appeared out of breath. Her eyes scanned the scene. 3 inmates down. Jack standing alone. No blood. No bruises. Just the silence of a man who'd been here before. What happened? 1 guard barked. They slipped, Jack said calmly. Green looked at him, long and hard, then turned to the guards. Escort them to medical, lock down C block for the night. But one of the guards began. Now. They obeyed. Once the others were gone, she stepped inside and closed the door behind her. You could have hurt them, she said quietly. I didn't, Jack replied. You should have called for help. They didn't give me time. She studied him. That wasn't just self-defense. That was training. Jack didn't answer. Green stepped closer. Who are you, Carter? He met her gaze. Someone trying to forget who he was. A beat passed. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I looked you up, she said. Had Jones run a backdoor search through a friend at Fort Bragg? Jack didn't move. I know about Operation Mongoose, she said. And the hostage extraction in Kandahar. I know why you disappeared after 2015. His eyes narrowed. You shouldn't have done that. You saved 6 soldiers from a collapsing embassy, and then vanished into civilian life. That was the deal, he said. No medals, no headlines. Just disappear. Why here? Because even ghosts need to eat, Jack said. And this place doesn't ask questions, she sighed. It will now. He turned away, wiping sweat from his temple with the sleeve of his shirt. Green hesitated, then asked softer, You ever think about coming back? Jack let out a short breath. I think about staying gone. She opened the door to leave. Before she stepped out, she said, You should talk to Jones. He still thinks he owes you. Might be time to cash that in. Jack said nothing. When the door closed, he stood alone again, but the silence felt heavier. That night, Jack returned to his room and pulled out his sketchbook. He flipped past drawings of Lily, past the cabin, past the sunflowers. He turned to a blank page and slowly began to sketch the restroom, the layout, the angles, the places to trap, the places to escape. He labeled each one, then paused, pencil hovering over the paper. He wrote one word at the top, Blaze, and then another beneath it, Soon. A gentle rain fell over the razor wire that morning. Inside the prison, the storm was quiet, but brewing. Jack Carter walked the west corridor with his mop bucket, the squeaky wheels trailing behind him like a shadow. His uniform still bore the faint outline of milk stains and bleach, but his gait remained steady, unrushed. He'd become, in the eyes of most, a fixture, unmoving, unchanging. A quiet man with a job to do, but not to Sergeant Marcus Jones. Jones had been watching Jack since the restroom incident. He hadn't said a word, not yet, but his eyes, once bored and half-lidded behind dark-rimmed glasses, had come alive. He recognized something in Jack's posture, the way his eyes scanned corners, without moving his head, the subtle way he positioned his feet near exits, always balanced. Only one kind of man moved like that, and Marcus Jones had met that man once before, in the desert under gunfire, bleeding out. It had been 2012. A dust storm had swallowed half of Kandahar. Visibility was down to inches. Delta Force had been sent in under Black Ops to recover a captured intelligence officer. The mission was tight, quick and quicker out. Jones, then a Green Air Force technician attached to Intel support, had tagged along as a last-minute translator. No one expected resistance. That assumption nearly killed them all. The enemy compound had been a trap. IEDs lined the hallway. Gunfire rained down from rooftops. Men screamed. Communications were cut. Jones had taken shrapnel to the thigh, and he still remembered the hot iron taste of his own blood as he crawled through the rubble. And then him. A shadow in the chaos, moving fast, precise, silent. Jack Carter had carried him 2 clicks through enemy territory under cover of night. When Jones woke up in the evac chopper, Jack was gone. No name. No thanks. Just gone. But Marcus had never forgotten those eyes. Now, a decade later, they were mopping floors in front of him. Jones waited until break hour to approach. Jack was alone in the back hallway, wiping down the windowless visitation booths. The paint peeled at the corners. The plastic chairs creaked. Jack liked this part of the prison. It was quiet. No guards. No eyes. Until he heard boots behind him. He turned slowly, mop still in hand. Jones stood at the doorway, arms folded. "Thought it was you," he said. Jack said nothing. "Took me a while, the beard, the hair, the mop." Jones smirked, but the eyes gave you away. Jack didn't move, didn't answer. Jones stepped closer. "You saved my life in Kandahar. I never thanked you. Still nothing." Finally, Jack spoke. "You were just a kid." Jones nodded. "Yeah, I'm not anymore." A beat passed. The 2 men stared at each other. Soldiers who'd buried too many names. Men who had learned to survive by forgetting how to speak. "You're not supposed to be here," Jones said softly. "I'm exactly where I need to be." "No," Jones countered. "You're where you chose to hide." Jack met his gaze. "Some debts can't be paid. Some scars can't be scrubbed clean. You think mopping floors is redemption?" "No," Jack said. "It's peace." Jones exhaled, frustration edging his voice. "Blaze has eyes everywhere. You know that, right? He's not gonna stop. You humiliated him. He'll come again. And next time, it won't be 3 guys with dull shivs. I'm prepared." "No, you're alone. That's not the same thing." Jack's jaw clenched. Jones stepped forward. "You saved me once. Let me return the favor." Jack raised an eyebrow. "And how exactly do you plan to do that?" "I've got access. roster movements, night shift schedules. I know who's with Blaze. I know who's scared of him. You're not the only one in this place trying to hold back the darkness." Jack considered it. Finally, he said, "What do you want in return?" Jones smiled slightly. "Nothing. Just don't let them break you." Jack looked away. "You've still got a fire in you," Jones continued. "I see it. Don't let them put it out." That night, a folded slip of paper was slid under Jack's door. C-Block detainee transfer. Blaze petitioning for shift to laundry detail. Approved. In the margin, a scribble, "Watch your six." Jack stared at it, then walked to the corner of his room and peeled back the mat where a few cleaning tools lay hidden. Not weapons, just things he had collected. Rubber tubing. Zip ties. A small hand-polished wooden dowel, all innocent. All useful in trained hands. He placed the note beside the tools. In the early hours of the morning, Jack found himself in the laundry corridor. The machines rumbled spitting steam into the narrow passageway like dragons exhaling. The place felt alive, hot, tight, deafening. He scanned the room. 2 new faces working folding detail. One he recognized from Blaze's table in the mess hall. The other kept glancing at Jack with a look that tried to mask fear. Jack filed it away. He turned to leave, but as he passed a laundry bin, a whisper came. "Strikers want to talk." Jack stopped. The voice belonged to a thin, older inmate named Vargas, a tattooed man with sharp eyes and a limp. "They heard what you did in the restroom," Vargas added. "Said you move like someone who used to own places like this." Jack didn't react. "We don't like Blaze either," Vargas continued. "He's got numbers. We've got brains. Could use a man like you." "I'm not interested in gangs," Jack said. "Then think of it as community self-defense." Jack glanced at the guard stationed outside, unbothered, nodding off. He looked back at Vargas. "Tell your community I'll listen." Vargas smiled. "They already know you are." Back in his quarters, Jack returned to his notebook. He sketched a new page. This one wasn't the layout of the restroom or the folding stations. It was the prison itself. Segments of C-Block routes to the laundry choke points, guard patrol rhythms. His military mind had been reactivated gears grinding back into motion like an old engine refusing to die. At the center of the diagram, he wrote 2 names, Blaze Lily. He drew a line between them, because somehow keeping her safe meant surviving this. And that meant the man he had buried deep the ghost of Delta Force was beginning to rise. The laundry room always hissed with steam, but that morning it sounded like it was breathing. Jack Carter stood by the industrial dryers folding crisp uniforms with slow, deliberate motions. Around him, the air hung thick with humidity and the distant rumble of machines. Most eyes glanced past him, unaware that something was changing beneath the surface. Jack wasn't here to clean anymore. He was preparing. The strikers weren't a gang in the traditional sense. No tattoos, no power games. They were a quiet coalition, mostly older inmates, lifers with brains, and time men who read books instead of lifting weights. They didn't start fights. They prevented them. But even the strikers had learned to keep their heads down since Blaze rose to dominance. That was beginning to shift. The first meeting had been short. Jack sat on an overturned laundry bin in a supply closet behind the boiler room neutral ground. 3 strikers stood before him. Vargas, the spokesman. 2 others, Milton, a grizzled former math teacher with a limp, and Darnell, a man who used to be an engineer before he spiraled into bad decisions. Vargas spoke plainly. "We want to help you, Carter, but not for revenge." Jack nodded. "Understood. You teach us what you know how to avoid, how to de-escalate, how to survive without raising a blade, and we'll give you numbers. Eyes. Hands when you need them." "I'm not starting a war," Jack said. Vargas smirked. "Neither are we. But sometimes to prevent one, you have to show the other side what a war would cost." Jack agreed. and the silent counterstrike began. It started with posture. He corrected how the strikers walked in the yard, shoulders, back, feet, shoulder width, apart, eyes level, but not confrontational. No slouching, no twitching. Confidence without aggression. Then came spatial awareness. Jack ran quiet drills disguised as conversations, how to spot a follower without turning, how to exit a room without exposing your back, how to memorize layout with a single glance. He taught them how to breathe under pressure, how to read body language, and most importantly, how to walk away without looking like prey. It was subtle, and it worked. Blaze noticed. "You see them," Blaze muttered to one of his men during rec hour. The Iron Fangs lounged on the bleachers, watching as the strikers moved calmly across the yard like synchronized swimmers. No fidgeting, no fear. Something had shifted in their demeanor. "They're hiding behind the janitor," one of his lackeys said. Blaze squinted at Jack, who was sweeping near the basketball court, seemingly uninterested in anything but dust. "No," Blaze growled. "He's training them." Blaze had underestimated the janitor. That would be the last time. Meanwhile, inside the staff break room, Officer Green approached Sergeant Jones with 2 paper cups of coffee. She handed one over and nodded toward the security monitor above. "He's waking them up," she said, watching the feet of Jack and the strikers moving as a single unit through the corridor. Jones took a sip. "Yeah, reminds me of basic training, only quieter. Blaze is losing control." Jones nodded. "He's gonna get reckless." Green glanced at him. "You gonna intervene?" Jones shrugged. "Only if Jack asks me to. He's not just teaching them how to survive. He's building discipline, strategy. I'm telling you, I saw him take down 3 guys without raising his voice." Green shook her head. "The prison system's not made for this kind of subtle war. Administration won't notice until it blows up in their face." "Then we keep our eyes open," Jones said. "And back the right side when it counts." Back in the janitor's quarters, Jack unfolded his notebook. Tonight's entry was a diagram of the laundry corridor. Red circles marked blind spots in the camera feed. Green lines represented guard rotation times. Yellow arrows indicated optimal exit routes in case of an ambush. Beside the sketch, he wrote a list. Blaze movement patterns. Iron Fang's lieutenants. Possible snitches. Vulnerable staff allies. Then a question. What would Delta do? He stared at it for a long time, then drew a line through it. What would Dad do? That night, Jack ran a covert training session in the old supply wing, an abandoned hallway no longer used due to faulty wiring. The guards left it alone. It was perfect. Milton Jack said, "Show me how you'd escape a chokehold." Milton stepped forward nervous. Jack demonstrated, slowly guiding his arm, explaining the leverage points, the position of the hips. Don't fight the choke. Break the base. Move the body. Darnell practiced disarming with a rolled-up towel as a stand-in for a shiv. Jack corrected his stance. If you can't end the threat, disrupt it. Make them hesitate. That's your window. The room was filled with grunts, focused breathing, and determination. These weren't soldiers, but they were learning. And Jack was remembering what it felt like to lead. Not for country, not for mission, but for purpose. Later, as the men filtered back to their cells, unnoticed, Jack lingered alone in the dark hallway. Officer Green appeared from the shadows. You always this good at avoiding cameras, Jack offered a dry smile. Old habit. She folded her arms. You're creating a resistance. I'm preventing a collapse. You really believe you can stop Blaze without violence? Jack looked at her. I'm not sure. But I believe I can teach men to stand. She nodded slowly. Then stand with this. She handed him a crumpled napkin. On it was scribbled, Blaze, C block. 3 a.m. laundry tunnel. Something planned. Jack tucked it into his pocket. I'll be ready, he said. Green looked at him, her voice lower now. I don't know what you were before, Jack, but whatever it was, You're becoming it again." Jack didn't respond. He turned and walked into the steam. The night was silent, but the counterstrike had begun. At precisely 2:58 a.m., the prison fell into a hush so complete it could break a man's nerves. The hum of fluorescent lights, the distant rattle of a pipe, the occasional cough echoing down the metal hallways. All of it felt too loud, too wrong. Jack Carter moved silently through the service tunnel behind the laundry corridor, his boots making no more sound than falling dust. His pulse was steady, his breath slow. He wasn't walking like a janitor anymore. He was stalking. The note from Officer Green passed through Sergeant Jones and, scribbled on a napkin, had warned him that Blaze was planning something at 3:00 a.m. in the laundry tunnel. Jack didn't know the details, but he didn't need them. Men like Blaze didn't play chess. They flipped the board when they felt cornered. And Blaze had been cornered for too long. Jack paused at the junction where 3 tunnels met. Steam hissed from a broken vent above. The air smelled of rust detergent and something metallic. He pressed his back against the wall and listened. Voices. Muffled. Urgent. Then footsteps. Not 1 pair. 2. No, 3. He recognized one voice, deep gravely. Blaze. Make it look like a riot. Janitor gets jumped. Strikers get blamed. By sunrise, they're all locked down. Easy, another voice answered. What if the janitor fights back? Blaze scoffed. Then we cut him. Fast. Leave the mop in his hand like a trophy. The third voice laughed. Jack's jaw tightened. He didn't feel fear. He felt calculation. 3 men. 1 narrow corridor. 1 surprise. But he waited. Waited to see if they said anything else. That's when he heard it. A 4th voice. Soft. Nervous. You said no one would get hurt. It stopped Jack cold. He knew that voice. It belonged to Eli, the wiry young inmate who had asked Jack to teach him how to defend himself. The one who'd practiced disarms with wide eyes and clumsy fists. The one who reminded Jack painfully of his daughter's classmates back home. He's with them. Jack's thoughts didn't race. They narrowed. He stepped into the corridor and let the light find him. Blaze turned at the sound of the footsteps, eyes flashing. Well, well. His 2 goons spread out. One held a makeshift blade wrapped in cloth. The other, a sharpened toothbrush. Jack took it all in with a single glance, stances spacing escape routes. Then his eyes settled on Eli. The boy froze. Eli Jack said quietly, "Is this your choice?" Eli's face twitched. "I didn't mean," he said, "if I helped, I'd be protected." Jack nodded once. "And now, you're in the middle of something you don't understand." Blaze laughed. "Too late for sermons, preacher." He lunged first, but Jack was already moving. He stepped inside Blaze's reach, deflecting the strike with his forearm pivoted, and drove a knee into Blaze's midsection. Blaze staggered, air knocked from his lungs. The second attacker came in swinging low. Jack twisted, grabbed a length of laundry tubing from a cart nearby, looped it around the man's wrist, and yanked it tight. A crack, a scream, the weapon dropped. The third man hesitated, young, unsure. Jack didn't strike him. He just looked him in the eye. Run. And the man ran. Eli stood frozen. Blaze, now furious, drew something from his waistband, a sharpened spike. He roared and charged. Jack waited, then sidestepped at the last second, grabbing Blaze's wrist and turning his momentum against him. The spike clattered to the floor. Jack swept the legs. Blaze hit the concrete hard. Then Jack pressed his knee to Blaze's chest and leaned in. "I warned you," he whispered. "You think this changes anything?" Blaze spat blood. Jack didn't answer. He looked at Eli. "Pick it up," he said, nodding to the spike. Eli stared. "What, pick it up?" Jack repeated. Trembling, Eli bent down and retrieved the weapon. Jack stood and turned Blaze over. "Now give it to him." Eli shook his head. "I can't." "You're not hurting him," Jack said. "You're giving it back." Eli hesitated, then dropped the spike beside Blaze's hand. Blaze reached for it slowly, defiantly. Jack stepped on it, grinding the tip into the floor. Then Officer Green's voice cut through the haze. "Drop it." Flashlights flooded the tunnel. Guards swarmed and weapons drawn. Jones was behind her hand on his radio. Blaze looked up from the floor, sneering. "Self-defense," he growled. "You brought a mop to a knife fight." Jack said nothing. Jones stepped forward. "We heard everything. We've got audio." Green nodded toward Jack. "He's clear." Then she turned to Blaze. "You, on the other hand, just earned yourself a transfer to solitary." Blaze cursed as 2 guards hauled him to his feet. Jack turned to Eli. "You have a choice now," he said. Eli's voice cracked. "I didn't mean to." Jack cut him off. "You did. But now you get to decide who you become next." Eli looked at the guards, then at Jack. "I want to make it right." Jack nodded. "Start by telling the truth." Later, back in his quarters, Jack sat alone with the lights off. His notebook lay open on the desk, untouched. He didn't sketch tonight. Instead, he pulled out Lily's last letter again. The words weren't fading, but they were becoming something else. A reason. A compass. Meanwhile, in the control room, Jones and Green reviewed the audio logs. Eli gave us everything Jones said. Confirmed Blaze tried to orchestrate a riot. Green leaned back. "Wardens authorizing Blaze's transfer in the morning. Jack just saved this place from a war." Jones folded his arms. "And no one will ever know." Green smiled faintly. Jack wouldn't want them to. In his room, Jack stood at the small window, looking up at a night sky he could barely see through the mesh wire. He didn't need stars. He had direction now, and he wasn't alone anymore. The next morning came wrapped in steam and tension. The laundry block buzzed as usual, industrial washers rumbling like distant thunder dryers, exhaling warm clouds into the stale air. But beneath the surface, something had shifted. The guards moved more deliberately. The inmates whispered less. The shadow of Blaze's transfer to solitary had left a vacuum, and nature hated a vacuum. Jack Carter knew that better than anyone. He moved through the room like always, quiet, methodical, invisible. His mop glided across the tiled floor, but his eyes scanned the angle's blind spots, behind vents' dark corners, near the rolling bins, and one particularly suspicious new face by the detergent drums. The strikers, now subtly bolder, were spread across the room, folding sheets, repairing uniforms, restocking supplies. But Jack had positioned them purposefully. Each man had a task and a vantage point. It wasn't paranoia anymore. It was preparation. Because Blaze was gone. But Blaze wasn't the only threat. That morning, Officer Green had slipped Jack a note written on the back of a requisition form. One of Blaze's lieutenants, Brick, is still loose. Rumor says he's planning something stupid. Watch your back. Jack didn't need the warning. He already knew. Brick was 6'4" and built like a wall of cinder blocks with anger issues. He didn't speak much, but when he did things, usually broke. He'd been with Blaze since county lockup, and loyalty like that didn't fade because a leader got sent to solitary. It calcified. Jack had seen it before in insurgents who clung to a cause even after it had fallen apart. That kind of man didn't attack head-on. He waited, then struck when your guard dropped, which meant Jack had to make a choice. Keep hiding or set the trap first. It was Milton, the retired teacher turned striker, who suggested the idea over a quiet lunch tray in the corner of the mess hall. "You've been playing defense," Milton whispered. "You're teaching us to survive." "But what if we gave them something to choke on for a change?" Jack looked at him. "You want to fight?" No, Milton said. "I want proof. I want the system to see what's been brewing in its blind spots." Jack considered it. A trap wasn't revenge. It was clarity. It was protection. It was strategy. That night, the laundry room was scheduled for a deep clean. Half the machines would be offline. Fewer guards on patrol. Jack made sure of that, submitting a maintenance concern about faulty water pipes. The request was approved without question. He left a trail, one that Brick would follow. At 1:03 a.m., the laundry room stood quiet. Only 2 inmates were listed as working late: Jack Carter and Darnell, the ex-engineer, with silent hands and nerves of steel. Darnell waited near the back loading door, fiddling with a dryer belt. Jack stood by the central folding table, wiping it slowly with a rag soaked in lemon cleaner. He didn't look up when the door creaked open, didn't flinch when heavy boots echoed through the corridor. Brick entered with 2 men, silent, hard-eyed, walking like sharks in a tank. Jack said nothing, just kept wiping. "Turn around," Brick growled. Jack obeyed, calm, centered, ready. One of the men moved toward Darnell. Darnell dropped the wrench in his hand and raised both arms. "I'm just here to fix the drum." Brick snorted. "You're all gonna need fixing." He took a step forward. That's when the lights cut. Complete blackness. A second of silence. Then click emergency floodlights kicked in, blinding and blue. And now everyone was visible, especially the 3 weapons drawn from inside pant waists, and the camera installed just days earlier, blinking silently above the detergent rack. Officer Green's voice rang through the loudspeaker. "Drop the weapons. You're being recorded. Guards en route. This is your only warning." The men froze. Brick's jaw tightened, but his blade clattered to the ground first. One by one, they obeyed. When the guards stormed in moments later, no punches were thrown. No one ran. The evidence was too obvious. Jack had made sure of it. The shivs had been wiped, polished, and then retaped with one partial fingerprint, left intentionally exposed bricks. Jones cuffed the 3 men himself. As they were escorted out, Brick looked at Jack over his shoulder. "You'd think you won this." Jack didn't smile. "I didn't win anything. I just kept you from making it worse." Brick scoffed. "You're not a janitor?" Jack's gaze hardened. "No, I'm a father." Brick was gone. The door slammed shut, and for the first time since Jack had set foot in the prison, there was peace in the laundry room. Later that morning in the staff break room, Green handed Jack a sealed envelope. Warden-approved early release recommendation review. Not a guarantee, but progress. Jack stared at it. Green added, "You've done more to stabilize this prison than half the administration," Jones told the board. "So did I." Jack looked up. "I didn't do it for them. I know," she said. "You did it for someone who still sends you crayon drawings with flowers." He allowed the smallest smile, then turned and walked away. Back in his room, Jack opened his notebook. He flipped past the diagrams, the sketches of Rout's weapons countermeasures, and turned to a fresh page. He drew Lily. This time, not from memory, but from hope. Smiling, holding a sunflower. Behind her stood a cabin in the woods, and next to it, him. Not in uniform. Not in a janitor's outfit. Just a man. A father. The silence after a storm is rarely peace. It's recalibration. The laundry ambush was thwarted. Blaze was gone. Brick and his lieutenants were locked in isolation. For the first time in weeks, the prison yard returned to a strange kind of normal, less charged, less violent. But Jack Carter wasn't celebrating, because what came next wasn't silence. It was something deeper, something foul. 2 days later, Vargas passed Jack a folded note inside a roll of paper towels. Warden's office requested Blaze's transfer. Not security protocol. Something's off. Jack read it twice, then burned it inside the janitor closet's old mop bucket. A single name echoed in his mind: Elliot Foster. The name had been whispered by Blaze the night Jack took him down. A name with no place inside a prison, but every place in Jack's past. 10 years ago, Elliot Foster was a defense contractor, slick, ruthless, well-connected. Jack had encountered him only once during a mission overseas that was supposed to be a simple extraction. Instead, it became a nightmare of buried files, ghost accounts, and illegal arms deals that cost 2 of Jack's teammates their lives. Jack had walked away from the military, not just because he lost his wife, but because he'd learned that sometimes the enemies wore suits, not uniforms. And Foster. He was the kind of man who never forgot unfinished business. Later that evening, Jack found Officer Green in the hallway outside the infirmary. She was sipping bad coffee and scrolling through her tablet. "I need 5 minutes," he said. She looked up. What now Blaze didn't orchestrate the riot attempt alone. "Someone on the outside wants me silenced, and he's using this prison to do it." Green raised an eyebrow. "You think someone's pulling strings above the warden?" "I don't think," Jack said. "I know the name." He leaned in. "Elliot Foster." The name made her blink. "He's defense industry, right? Private security. Shady contracts." Jack nodded. "And a man who pays good money to bury secrets." Green glanced around. "That name doesn't belong in a place like this." "That's exactly why it's here," Jack said. "He's trying to erase me without drawing headlines. No sniper, no car bomb, just prison politics made to look like inmate violence." Green exhaled. "You sure I'm not guessing?" Jack said. "Foster's signature move is always misdirection. Hire locals. No trace, no bullet casings. Just one less name on the books." Green hesitated, then pulled out her phone. "I'll call Jones, see if we can dig." That night, Jack couldn't sleep. The threat was no longer just inside the walls. It reached beyond to Lily, to the life he'd promised to rebuild. If Foster was involved, then the stakes had changed. And this wasn't about survival anymore. It was about exposure. The next morning, Jones met Jack outside the boiler room. "Green told me everything he said. I did some digging. Nothing in the prison database connects to Foster, but..." He held up a folder. This came from a friend in procurement. A file tagged "Confidential Vendor Access." Someone with high-level clearance signed off on Blaze's original prison placement. Name redacted. But the sponsor account, Jones flipped the page. EF Holdings, shell company for Foster Industries. Jack stared at it. This is the proof, he said. He planted Blaze here knowing Blaze would do the dirty work. Jones nodded grimly. "And the riot? Just step one. If it worked, you'd be gone, and no one would ask questions." Jack looked away. He always plays the long game. Jones handed him a flash drive. "I made a copy. But be careful. This kind of evidence doesn't stay quiet for long." Back in his cell, Jack inserted the flash drive into the prison's outdated library computer. He opened the files. There it was. A paper trail, false names, encrypted payment routes, an internal memo confirming the transfer of a cooperative asset to Middleton Correctional Facility, his prison. It all traced back to EF Holdings. Jack sat back in the chair, pulse steady. Now he had a weapon. And it wasn't a shiv. It was the truth. But truth needed a voice. He knew just the one. Jessica Holloway had once been Jack's wife's best friend, and now served as Lily's legal guardian while Jack was incarcerated. She was also a tenacious civil attorney with a nose for buried secrets. Using his monitored phone time, Jack dialed her number. She picked up on the first ring. "Jack, I need your help," he said, "and I need it fast." He explained everything. The ambushes, Blaze, Foster, the flash drive, the risk. By the time he finished, Jessica's voice was razor sharp. "Send the drive." "I can't. Not directly. Too many eyes." She paused. "Then smuggle it." Jack didn't ask how. She'd figure it out. They always had when Maggie was alive. The 3 of them had once been unstoppable. Now 2 remained, and one had a mission. At dawn, Jack handed the drive tucked inside a hollowed-out cleaning brush to Darnell, who was being transferred to kitchen duty for the week. A quiet man. Trustworthy. "Give it to Officer Green," Jack said. "She'll know where to send it." Darnell nodded and slipped it into his sleeve. That evening, Green confirmed the package had been mailed. To a Jessica Holloway, she said. I used a personal courier off record. No system logs. Jack exhaled. Then we've got a shot. Green looked at him, her eyes cautious but impressed. You just declared war on a man with lobbyists and mercenaries on speed dial. Jack looked out the window, the iron bars casting long shadows across his face. No, he said. I just shined a flashlight on a cockroach. For the first time since Jack Carter set foot in Middleton Correctional, he felt like time was running for him. Not against. Jessica had the flash drive. She would know exactly what to do, how to dig cross-reference leak carefully. Foster's game had been built on silence. But Jessica, she had built a career dismantling silence one fact at a time. Still, Jack knew better than to exhale just yet. Because when powerful men feel a crack forming in the wall, they don't try to patch it. They send wrecking balls. 2 days passed. Jessica didn't call. Jack paced his cell at night, staring at the narrow window, counting stars through the bars. He replayed her voice in his head. Sharp, calm, focused. But he also remembered what she once said back when Maggie's case was buried by hospital lawyers. The second you go after men in suits, you better have backup shoes because you're gonna run. On the third night, Officer Green passed by Jack's door. She paused, leaned close. No call yet, she whispered. But we got a ping. Jessica accessed a federal leak portal from a public IP. Smart. Jack nodded, but dangerous. Green's voice lowered. She's painting a target on herself. Jack's jaw clenched. He knew that feeling, knew it all too well. Outside the prison, in a quiet townhouse on the edge of D.C., Jessica Holloway sat alone, blinds drawn, phone turned off. She had submitted the initial leak to a protected journalist database, then backed it up to 3 encrypted locations, then printed a copy and stored it inside her car's spare tire well. And still, she didn't feel safe. The documents didn't just expose Elliot Foster's prison plant operations. They showed linkages to offshore arms, sales payoffs to foreign officials, and names of military contractors connected to civilian casualties. Jack hadn't just handed her a landmine. He had handed her the truth, and truth had a blast radius. Back inside Middleton, Jack was in the yard when Sergeant Jones approached. There's movement, Jones said under his breath. Foster filed a motion through a connected law firm. They're trying to transfer you to a federal holding facility on security conflict grounds. Jack looked up slowly. When next 72 hours. Jack didn't blink, because he knew what that meant. A transfer would mean isolation. No contact, no communication. And in a federal facility, accidents were easier to arrange. The window was closing. Fast. That night, Green intercepted a coded message from Jessica through the system's legal mail review. It was a handwritten letter addressed to Jack passed through the mailroom. Inside were only 3 words. They're watching me. Beneath it, a single phrase in legal shorthand, habeas motion pending. Jack decoded it instantly. She was working to file an emergency motion to freeze his transfer, using the evidence as leverage. But it wasn't filed yet, meaning she was buying time. Or being watched. Or both. In his room, Jack opened his notebook to a new page. This time he didn't draw. He wrote. Plans, contingencies, safe names, unmarked allies inside the walls, which inmates to avoid, which guards to trust. He listed one phrase and underlined it, if they come early. At 2:44 a.m., Jack's door opened. 2 guards stood there, faces unreadable. Carter once said, "You've been flagged for early transfer. Orders from upstairs." Jack didn't move. Midnight transfers aren't standard. The other guard shrugged. "They are when DC makes the call." Jack noticed something. Neither of them were familiar faces. No badge names, no chatter, no paperwork in hand. This wasn't protocol. This was Foster. As they reached the exit corridor, Jack caught a reflection in a glass panel. A third figure stepped into the hallway. Ahead, Officer Green Eye's sharp hands behind her back. "Where's your transfer paperwork?" she asked. The taller guard tensed. "We have digital clearance." "That's not how this works," she said. "You move a prisoner on my floor, I sign it. Every time." One of the men stepped forward, hand twitching toward his belt. Not a weapon, but something else. Jack's instincts flared. Green's hand moved faster. She flipped open a badge from her hip, a secondary ID Jack hadn't seen before. "Internal affairs," she said calmly. "Step back." The two men froze. Jack blinked. IA Green nodded once toward him, then turned back to the imposters. "You'll both be detained until DHS verifies your credentials." They ran. Didn't get far. Sergeant Jones tackled one. The other made it as far as the sally port before being caught on camera. Within minutes, the prison was in lockdown. Later that morning, Jack sat across from Green in a private office. She dropped the facade, now no guard posture. Just a woman exhausted from playing 3 roles too long. "I couldn't tell you before," she said. "I was embedded. Part of a quiet oversight unit watching state-run facilities for unusual contractor involvement." Jack exhaled. "So you were here for Blaze?" "I was here for whoever placed Blaze." "And me?" She met his eyes. "You weren't on the radar until the name Foster showed up. Then you became the center of it all." Jack leaned forward. "Jessica's in danger." Green nodded. "We'll protect her. But we need more." "She has it," Jack said. "Everything she needs. Then let's give her the time." By sunset, the transfer was officially blocked. Jessica's emergency habeas motion had gone through. Jack would stay at Middleton for now. But more importantly, the Federal Oversight Board had begun reviewing Foster's contracts. A small crack. But cracks grow, especially when the man behind them has nothing left to lose. In his cell that night, Jack wrote a single line in his notebook, beneath Lily's latest drawing of a sunflower. "The only way to silence the storm is to let the world hear it." The prison was quieter than usual. Not the calm of peace, but the stillness of a drawn bowstring stretched to its limit. Jack Carter sat in the chapel alone. The wooden pew beneath him creaked softly as he leaned forward, elbows on knees, hands clasped. He wasn't praying. He wasn't sure if he believed in that anymore. But he was listening to the silence, to the air, to the weight in his chest that hadn't let up since Jessica's last message. They've frozen some of Foster's accounts. More to come. Be careful. He knows. Foster always knew. And men like him didn't lose quietly. The day had been uneventful, almost too normal. No fights, no glares in the yard, no shift in energy among the guards. The iron fangs had scattered, since Blaze's removal brick was locked up indefinitely, and even the strikers had grown less tense. But Jack knew better than to mistake quiet for safety, especially when the storm had a deadline. Tomorrow morning, an oversight panel would review Jessica's submitted documents, along with the DHS evidence Green and Jones had secured. If the review went through, Foster's connections to Blaze, the illegal transfers, and the planted hits would be exposed. But tonight, Jack was still vulnerable. And the kind of men Foster hired didn't miss deadlines. At 9:52 p.m., the lockdown lights flickered. An unusual power delay, no more than a second, but enough to make Jack's eyes narrow. When the backup generators kicked in, Jack quietly stood and left the chapel. He didn't go back to his quarters. He went to the boiler corridor and waited. It was nearly midnight when he heard the sound. A faint clatter, a door left ajar. Jack moved without a sound, weaving between shadows like breath in winter. Then came the voice, young, panicked. "Help! Please, somebody, he's bleeding." Jack turned sharply and followed the sound down the hall toward the storage wing. A setup. He knew it instantly, but he didn't hesitate. He ran. When he burst into the utility room, the lights were dim, Only the red glow of the exit sign gave any shape to the space. A figure stood by the far wall hunched. Another lay on the floor. Jack moved toward the body first. The second figure lunged. Jack spun, caught the attacker mid-stride, and slammed him into the shelving unit. A third man appeared from behind a cabinet, knife drawn. Jack ducked. The swing rolled and grabbed the fire extinguisher from the wall. Hiss-crack, the canister smashed into the man's arm. The blade flew. Jack turned too late. The first man was already up, swinging a broom handle like a bat. It caught Jack across the ribs. He staggered but didn't fall. He absorbed the pain, then released something deeper, something old, something trained. He struck low, kicking the first man's knee out, driving a shoulder into his gut. The second man rushed him again. Jack flipped him with his momentum, sending him crashing onto the table. The third reached for the fallen blade. Jack's voice cut through the chaos like a gunshot. "Don't." And the man froze. Something in Jack's voice, a tone that didn't come from fear or anger, but command, stripped the moment bare. Then came boots in the hallway, flashlights, guards, and Officer Green's voice. Down now. Within seconds, the room filled with bodies and shouting. The ambushers were on the ground, zip-tied and restrained. Jack stood against the wall, bleeding from a shallow cut above his eyebrow, one hand still clenched. Jones arrived moments later. What the hell happened? Green looked at Jack. Jack's breath came slowly. Foster's last card. The next morning, the warden's office was under federal review. The three attackers caught on security footage had been paid through a bank account linked to a shell corporation traced back to Foster's offshore holdings. By noon, Elliot Foster's legal team had gone silent. By sunset, federal agents had raided 3 of his properties, and Jack Carter Jack was told he'd be released within 72 hours. But none of that was what stayed with him. What stayed was Eli. The young inmate Jack had once trained, who had stood outside the utility room, frozen, watching the whole ambush unfold. After the attackers were taken away, Jack had approached him. "You saw them?" Eli nodded, eyes wide. "They told me if I didn't yell, they'd hurt my brother. He's in another facility." "Foster's reach, I know," Jack said gently. "I didn't know what to do." "You did the right thing," Jack said. Eli looked down. "I was a coward." Jack put a hand on his shoulder. "No, you were afraid. There's a difference. But tonight, you didn't run. You watched. That means next time you'll act." Eli didn't answer, but he didn't look away. That night, Jack returned to the chapel. He sat in the same pew. This time, not in silence, but in something closer to peace. Officer Green found him there. "You should rest," she said. Jack looked at the stained glass above the pulpit. A cross. A dove. A rising sun. "I will." She sat beside him, hands folded. For a while they said nothing. Then she asked, "What will you do?" "When you walk out of here," Jack smiled just slightly. "Take my daughter fishing, in silence. No fences, no gates, just the sky." Green smiled back. "You earned that." He looked at her eyes, tired but resolute. "No," he said. "I just survived for it. The earning begins now." The morning Jack Carter was released, the sky broke into a color he hadn't seen in years. It wasn't the dull gray glow behind barbed wire or the flickering fluorescence of C-block. It was clean. A soft pink hue bleeding into gold, like the sky itself had taken a deep breath after holding it too long. He stood in the concrete Sally Port with nothing but a duffel bag slung over his shoulder, inside a rolled-up sketchbook, a faded photo of his daughter, and the folded letter from Maggie he had still never opened. Officer Green walked with him to the gate. "It's official," she said, handing him a crisp envelope. "Charges dismissed. Record sealed. Oversight panel called you a catalyst for reform." "I'd say that's a first." Jack offered a faint smile. "I wasn't trying to reform the system, I know," she replied. "You were just trying to survive it." They paused at the threshold. "You sure you don't want to ride?" she asked. Jack looked beyond the fence to where a rusted pickup truck idled near the tree line, headlights off. "No," he said. "My ride's here." Green followed his gaze, then nodded. "Well, take care, Jack." He shook her hand. "Thank you for seeing more than the uniform." She hesitated. "You were never just a uniform." Then she turned and the gate buzzed open. Jack stepped out into the morning and into freedom. Lily ran toward him before he could take a second breath. She was taller than he remembered, no longer the tiny girl in pigtails, but a young lady with long, wind-tangled hair and wide eyes filled with something too big for words. He dropped the bag and caught her mid-stride. The impact stole the air from his lungs, but he didn't care. She clung to him, arms around his neck, breath shaking. "I missed you, Daddy," she whispered. Jack closed his eyes. "I missed you more than there are stars." Jessica stood nearby, her hand covering her mouth. Tears glinted in her eyes, but she didn't speak. She didn't need to. Jack gave her a nod of deep gratitude, the kind only earned through trust and war. She nodded back. "I've got the cabin ready," she said softly. "It's not perfect, but the roof doesn't leak." Jack laughed, his first real laugh in years. "Then it's more than I ever had." The drive out of the city was quiet. Lily leaned against his shoulder in the passenger seat. Jessica drove, hands steady, eyes on the horizon. They passed long stretches of pine trees and winding roads that Jack had memorized from old maps, but never from memory. He didn't speak for the first hour. He just listened to the hum of tires, the rustle of wind, the soft breaths of his daughter asleep beside him. He wasn't thinking about Foster or prison or the wounds beneath his skin. He was thinking about dinner, about teaching Lily how to build a fire, about waking up without someone banging a baton on metal bars. The cabin sat on a hill, just past an old fishing pond, its paint faded, but warm, its porch sagging in the most charming way. Wild sunflowers had bloomed along the fence line, planted from seeds Lily had saved, just like she'd written. When Jack stepped onto the porch, he ran his fingers along the wood railing. Rough, weathered, just like him. Inside, the walls still smelled of cedar. The fireplace hadn't been used in years. Jessica had made up 2 beds, one in the main room, one in the loft. Privacy might be overrated, she joked. Jack smiled. "We'll earn that, too." She left shortly after hugging Lily tight and whispering something in her ear before turning back down the gravel path. Jack watched her go, heart full. Then he turned to Lily. "Want to see something?" She nodded eagerly. He pulled out the sketchbook from his duffel and handed it to her. She flipped through page after page, her smile in pencil lines, the cabin sketched from memory. Sunflowers, fireflies, rivers, even the laundry room transformed into an arena of shadows and survival. Her fingers trembled as she turned the last page. It was a new drawing, drawn just days before release. A father and daughter sitting at a pond's edge, fishing poles in hand. No barbed wire, no fences, just freedom. She looked up at him. "Can we do that?" Jack nodded. "Every day, if you want." That night they built a fire together. Jack taught Lily how to lay the kindling, how to feed it air, how to listen for the crackle that meant it had caught. She sat beside him on the old porch swing, wrapped in a blanket, eyes wide at the stars. "There are so many," she whispered. "They were always there," Jack said. "We just couldn't see them." She looked at him. "Are we safe now?" Jack thought of the files, the agents, the men who still lived in shadows. He didn't lie. "We're safer than we were," he said. "And we're not alone anymore." She leaned against his side. "Are you ever going back?" she asked. "To the prison?" "No, to being who you used to be." He took a long breath. "I think I'll always be him," he said softly. "But I don't have to live like him." She nodded as if she understood more than any child should. Then she whispered, "I'm glad you're my dad." Jack's throat tightened. I'm glad I still get to be. Much later, when Lily had gone to sleep upstairs, Jack sat alone by the fire. He reached into his duffel one last time and pulled out the sealed envelope Maggie had left him all those years ago. The one marked, "If anything happens." He held it for a long time, then opened it. Inside was a single sheet. If you're reading this, it means you kept your promise. You came back. Maybe not in one piece, but you came back. I always knew you'd fight for her. But I hope now you remember how to live for her, too. Be gentle. Be kind. Let yourself smile again. And tell her about me. When the time is right. All my love. Jack folded the letter and placed it inside his sketchbook. Then he stepped outside to breathe in the cool night air. And for the first time in years, he let himself believe the fight was no longer just to survive. It was to build something worth surviving for. The first real rain came a week after Jack Carter's release. It didn't fall in heavy, punishing sheets like the storms he'd known in combat zones or in the damp mist that clung to prison walls. It came gently like forgiveness. As if the sky, after holding its breath for so long, finally decided to weep and smile at the same time. Jack stood barefoot on the porch of the cabin, the old wood cool beneath his feet. The breeze carried the scent of pine and wet earth. Inside, Lily's laughter echoed down the hall as she set the table for breakfast she had insisted on cooking that morning. French toast, from scratch, with extra cinnamon. It smelled like home. It was home. He had spent the last few days rebuilding it piece by piece, replacing the back fence, cleaning the dust from every crevice, fixing the porch swing with Lily's help, her small fingers gripping the screwdriver, her voice full of questions about wood, about wind, about everything. Every morning he sketched something new, not out of habit anymore, but joy. And every evening they sat under a wool blanket and counted stars until they fell asleep, safe warm together. But something still remained unfinished. That afternoon, Jack and Lily drove into town in the old pickup. The sun had returned, and Main Street bustled with quiet life. A post office with peeling paint, a grocery store with handwritten price signs, and a coffee shop called Second Chances. Jack smiled at the name. They entered the town library where Jessica was waiting. She stood from a bench near the back window dressed in jeans and a faded college sweatshirt, holding a slim manila folder in her hands. "Found something," she said, offering it to Jack. He opened it slowly. Inside were court documents, sealed, stamped, official. Foster had been indicted. Multiple charges: conspiracy, obstruction, illicit foreign arms, dealing attempted witness interference. His empire was unraveling corporate partners, fleeing assets, frozen international warrants pending. Jessica looked at him carefully. He won't walk away from this. Jack stared at the page a long time, then nodded. "I never wanted revenge," he said. "I know," she replied. "But truth has a way of clearing the path ahead." She handed Lily a folded brochure art classes for kids held every Saturday at the community center. Lily beamed. "Can I go, Dad?" Jack ruffled her hair. "You can do anything now." They spent the afternoon walking through the farmer's market, picking out apples and jars of wildflower honey. Jack bought Lily a sunflower from a woman with silver hair and a knowing smile. They passed a group of veterans gathered under a small awning with a handwritten sign, "Veterans for Change, Mental Health and Reintegration Support." One of the men about Jack's age looked up. "You served?" he asked gently. Jack nodded. "Marine. Retired." The man smiled. "Once a Marine." Jack returned it. "Always a Marine." They talked for 15 minutes, about transition, about loss, about purpose. Jack didn't share details, but he promised to come back. He meant it. That night, back at the cabin, Jack sat on the porch while Lily painted watercolors in the living room. He held Maggie's letter in one hand and in the other, a blank page. He began writing. Not a report, not a log, not a confession. A story. His story. He wrote about what it meant to be lost behind walls. Walls made of steel, and walls made of guilt. He wrote about silence, and how sometimes the quietest people carry the loudest truths. He wrote about Blaze and Brick, about Eli, about the way the system had cracked but hadn't fully broken. And he wrote about Lily, about the day she was born and the first time she called him Daddy, about the night she cried herself to sleep holding her mother's sweater, about the sunflower seeds she planted and the hope they carried. He wrote because he had survived, and now it was time to plant something of his own. 1 week later, his story appeared anonymously on a veteran's blog. Then it spread. Not because it was sensational, but because it was true. Men and women in uniforms retired, and active read his words and felt seen. A senator's office reached out. So did a nonprofit for justice reform. Jack didn't ask for any of it. He simply responded with one line. If this helps even one man stand tall again, then I've done enough. Months passed. The cabin grew into a home, meals shared, walls painted, books stacked in every room. Lily won a ribbon in her art class for a watercolor of their porch at sunset. Jack framed it. And on the anniversary of Maggie's passing, he and Lily released paper lanterns across the pond. One carried a note. We're still here, and we're okay. Thank you. On a bright spring morning, a letter arrived in a thick envelope from the Department of Veterans Affairs. A medal. One that had once been classified. A citation Jack never expected to receive. For bravery. For service. For saving lives on and off the battlefield. He held it for a long moment, then placed it in a small wooden box beside Maggie's letter. And beneath it he wrote, "For Lily. For tomorrow. For peace." As the sun set that evening, Jack and Lily sat at the edge of the pond, feet dangling over the dock. The air smelled of pine and smoke and hope. Lily looked up. "Dad, yeah. What do you think Mom would say if she saw us now?" Jack smiled. "She'd say, 'I knew you'd find your way back.'" Lily nodded, satisfied, then leaned her head on his arm. And in that quiet moment, surrounded by fireflies and fading light, Jack Carter finally understood. He hadn't just kept a promise. He had become it. Where in the world are you watching from? We love seeing how far these true-hearted stories reach, so drop a comment and let us know your city or country. If this story touched you and you'd like to hear more, consider subscribing to our channel. We share real, inspiring, and quietly powerful stories, all rooted in kindness, courage, and second chances. Thank you for spending your time with us. Until next time, stay well, stay kind, and remember, sometimes the quietest people carry the loudest truths.